Yeah, hey, it's Phil coming back at you, man. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Hey, this time we're going to get back into our servos. I'm going to talk a little bit about competition servos, right? There's a lot of different servos on the market, stock sizes, aftermarket sizes. What do they mean? What's the best one? It's a fine dance, right? Just because the servo is bigger, it means that it's applying more pressure, for sure, for sure. But is that always a good thing, right? It's going to depend on your shift kit, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not. Are you using stock? Are you not using stock? Are you using aftermarket? Not using the aftermarket. I'm going to show you the differences. We're going to actually look at the pistons, right? We're going to see the sizes. I'll show you what the 569, right? Your grandma's car, what size it actually is. I'll show you the Monte Carlo SS, right? Something big like a 692. I'll also show you some of the aftermarket ones. My favorite one, damn, it's discontinued. Son of a gun. But hey, there's another one out there that's also pretty good, not quite as big as it is, but again, it's pretty good. I'll show you how to set up the one that's discontinued because that's the one I love, and I'm actually using it in my build right here that I'm showing you, and I used it previously also, so if you can find new old stock or you can find the used one or something, that's your best bet. But if you can't, hey, there's a great aftermarket alternative that's also pretty good that might be good for you as well. So I'll show you the differences, and I'll show you how to set them up. I'll show you why you use one versus why using the other, and again, you do you. Right on. Look over my shoulder, man. We'll have a blast. Hey, just a quick reminder for you. Go back and watch the previous video, number 20, and I show all about the servo and what it is and how to set it up. But again, just as a fresh reminder, remember that the band is squeezing around the drum, right? Your band is squeezing around the drum, stopping it for second gear, and the pin from the servo fits in right here into the band, right, like so. So what the pin is doing is actually pushing this way, right? Once fluid gets in between the piston and the cover, right, it's pushing the piston this way, right, this way, which is forcing the pin that's sitting in the band to squeeze the band, right, applying the brakes like a drum brake in a car. Right? And this piston is what we're actually measuring. The bigger this piston is, obviously, the more surface area. More area equals more force. So we're applying more force to the band, which is stopping the drum quicker and holding it tighter longer. So again, go back and watch video number 20 as a reminder, what it does, how it does it, how to set it up. And then we'll show you what the differences are here with the larger and smaller servos. Hey, how about taking a second, like and subscribe, huh? Come on, show some love. Our 569 piston comes in right about 2.346. Our 692 piston comes in right around 2.522, 21. Look at the diameter of the piston on the Superior / Fairbanks one. You can see we come in right about 2.8165. Our Sonnax piston comes in right around 0.922. Our CK servo pulls in just about 312 and a half. For its piston. Yeah, hey, I don't have a Grand National one in my scrap pile to show you the measurements on. Part number 694, right? The last three digits of the servo would be that. That one comes in at 2.675, right? So it's a little bit bigger than the 692 that came in like your Monte Carlo SS's, and a little bit smaller than your Fairbanks or Superior aftermarket ones. So it's the high end for the stock 204Rs, but the aftermarket has bigger ones, and again, I'm not really a fan of the 694, but there it is. Here's a chart of everything. The Superior Super Servo is set up using your stock components here. What they have you do, take off your Teflon sealing ring that is normally on here and discard it, and also take off your cushion spring. So they recommend using no cushion spring. They do use the bell housing as well as the return springs. Of course, you'd have a Teflon ring here and a Teflon ring here, but no Teflon ring installed there. And again, just installing it onto your piston. Put your lip seal here, again your lip facing down in this direction, and a lip seal here, again lip facing up in the direction, and of course your O-ring goes here on your cover, as always. Put it in. Then of course this is installed into your transmission as we have done previously. Again, I'm not a fan of this particular one. Again, they recommend removing the cushion spring. And also, the big advantage of the Sonnax one is this pin is captive, right? It's held in by that ring. So the Sonnax one is a better advantage for that. Sonnax servo is straightforward setup, as they all are. First thing you want to do is take your stock pin and bell housing, and you'll find a little clip. That little clip, of course, is right here, and that's what holds your bell housing onto your pin. What you want to do is remove the clip. Right, simply push out in this direction, but be careful, right, because it's going to want to go across the room. So do it in a down direction. Ideally, cover it in a towel, for example, and push out that way. Again, just make sure it doesn't fly across the room, because that'll be a bad day. Then, of course, your bell housing comes off your pin. We're not going to reuse the pin. Rather, we'll take the new Sonnax pin. What you're going to want to do is apply your rings. Your Teflon rings, there's two of them. They both go, one goes here, and one goes here. Right, that's what squeezes into the bore. And of course, your regular ring actually goes here, right, onto the second slide. So once you get those installed, what you'll want to do, take your bell housing, put it over the top, and your shim on top of your bell housing. Then your cushion spring, this is the stock cushion spring, goes on top of there. Then of course your piston goes onto your assembly. Now what we have to do is squeeze the cushion spring down so that we can fit the E-clip onto this first ring here. Right, this is what holds our piston onto our assembly. Right, so put your piston on, squeeze it down. Ideally use a vise or a clamp, and then of course take your ring and just push it through there. Now you'll have the assembly in. What you'll want to do is take your seal rings, right, your lip seals. Let's take that off. This lip seal goes down in this direction, right, to be installed. Again, these lip seals face in opposite directions. So the bottom faces in this direction and the top faces in this direction. Again, they're opposite directions. So you can see, hopefully, right, the bottom one gets installed down, and of course our top one gets installed facing up. like so. And of course the big O-ring goes onto our cover, like so. Then we'll go ahead and install the assembly inside of our servo, and we'll test it just like we have previously. And again, what we're looking for is 110 clearance. So 110 is what Sonnax calls for clearance. Again, check it the same way that we did in the previous video. Hey, how about taking a second, like and subscribe, huh? Come on, show some love. And once you do get it mounted, of course, don't forget to include the return spring. Again, always use your return spring and always use your cushion spring. Sonnax does say it's okay to use this spacer with the ring part down. Return spring mounts on there. So no cushion spring. Personally, I would never do that. Again, the cushion spring is there for a cushion and it prevents things from slamming in. But again, you can do as you wish. But personally, I always 100% of the time use the cushion spring. So I personally don't use this spacer at all, ever. So I always use the cushion spring and the bell housing. Besides the size of the piston, the biggest feature of this is the fact that that pin is held captive by the clip when it's installed, so that the pin can't move up and down. It's basically stationary. I'm going to show you how I set up the CK Performance servo. At the time, it was the biggest one in the industry, but I understand now that it's been discontinued. On their website, they only have one that's equivalent to a Grand National, so it is smaller. So maybe the Sonnax one is the biggest one. This one is very unique in that I'm cutting the top of the pin as opposed to the pointy section of the pin. So again, don't follow my lead unless you're sure that you also have the competition one. Again, make sure that you are. Otherwise, follow the instructions that come with it. But I'll show it up here just for your reference because it is a very unique setup. As a first step, we're going to want to remove our snap ring holding our bell housing to our ply pin. And you can see that it's right there. So first thing you want to do, grab one side with your thumb, grab the other side with just a small screwdriver. Yeah, I know, craftsman, fanboy, yada yada yada. And go ahead and pry it. Be careful, don't go all the way just yet. And you'll see it'll come off partially. Then what you want to do is grab the end and give it a pull back. But again, be careful, right? We don't want this flying across the room. So easiest, just cover it up, something. And I'm coming in and I'm prying. There you can see our snap ring came out and it did not go across the room. So again, very important. Now take these apart. Of course, you're going to want to clean this up. And what we're going to want to do is take off between 0.225 and 0.250, right? 250 being a 1/4 inch off of this end of the pin, right? So we're going to shorten it. Not this end, but rather this end. I've marked off a 225 mark where we want to come to. Again, that's approximate, but for safety, let's go ahead and measure exactly the length of our pin currently. And we can see it's at just about 39992. So we're going to want to take 225 to 250 off from there. So just taking our 39925, if we subtract our 225 or our 250, we want to be somewhere between 3.7675 and 3.7425. So let's go over to the grinder and cut her down. I'm going to take it over to the mini disc sander. And again, I'm just cutting to that line. Approximately, we'll stop and measure in between. See where we're at. That's where we started at our 3992. And again, we have to be between 76 and 74. And we're right around 83, 84. So we're getting closer, almost there. Let's check it again. One more time. We were at 83, 84. Getting closer. Now we're at just about 80, 81. Took it back there a couple more times, and now I think we're right in the middle. As you can see, we're at 375.5. And we were looking for between 376 and 374. So we should be good to go. One thing to note after cleaning or after cutting this, notice the buildup of material in the end. Obviously, we don't want that material in there. So definitely do remember to clean it out, as that would be bad for the transmission, of course. Also, once you get it trimmed, there's some sharp edges on here, so make sure that you chamfer the end of this so that it's not sharp and it won't catch on our servo piston. So again, chamfer the edge of that. By the way, here's the little belt sander I was using. Again, very compact. It's good when you're working on governors. I'll show you that later on. It's just a simple, this one's just a Wen 1x30 belt sander. 5-inch sanding disc on the side, just bought it on Amazon. Definitely well worth it if you're working on small parts like we are for our transmission. And we've got a nice chamfer on the edge there. Right on the top. No more sharp edges to catch on our servo. Next thing we want to do, put our bell housing back on. You can verify, of course, there's no sharp edges there. Get our C-clip, snap ring, whatever you want to call it. Go ahead and push it back on there. Again, making sure it doesn't go flying across the room, but usually it doesn't do that when you're putting it on. It's only when you're taking it off. Don't forget, of course, to replace your Teflon seals here and here. Squeeze them in, make sure that they're seating well. Again, always replace those Teflon seals, and we should be good to go. CK servo comes usually pressed onto there already. Just blow some air in through that hole and the pieces will separate. Again, it's a really tight fit, a nice piece. And the two lip seals are already installed. So what you want to do is install your bottom lip seal onto there. Again, lube it up really good, as always. And your lip, of course, faces down. Right, so again, our lip faces in this direction. You can see our lip is over here. Work it around. Make sure you get her seated in there. Nice and straight, of course. Make sure your O-ring is on the outside, and you can just attach the two pieces. Again, it has to go in perfectly straight, otherwise the two surfaces will not go in. Take your time and get them to blend together. And take your time, get it mounted into there. Again, the piston you can put into the freezer and keep the cover inside at room temperature, for example, and that'll shrink the piston, make it a little bit easier to go in. Again, it's a very tight fit on the CK servos, but again, be patient and use plenty of tranny fluid and it should be just fine. And again, don't forget your lip seal with the lip facing in this direction on the bottom, and of course your case O-ring here. The CK kit comes with two shims, a thin one and a thick one. Right, what you want to do is take your thin one and insert it into the bottom, into the piston. And then you want to take your cushion spring. Always use a cushion spring, I don't care whose servo you're using. And of course you want to take your pin assembly. And that should fit in nice as well. Again, make sure everything moves very smoothly. Let's go ahead and test fit our servo into there. Notice I'm not using the case O-ring. Lube up your bore. Again, fluid is good, and the same thing on the servo itself. Go ahead and insert it. And make sure she goes all the way in. The CK servo, they want 125 thousandths clearance, and that's actually a 1/8 of an inch drill bit, so very easy to check. Of course, that clearance is between the retaining ring we're going to put in and the servo cover. All you have to do is take your drill bit, put it in there, and it should be able to fit in between the two when the clearance is just right. Take your retaining ring, go ahead and mount that in there. There we go, we're in. Now remember, on the side we have our vice grips, right, mounted to our output shaft, and that's how we're checking when our servo is applied, and that's when we're going to check our clearance, when we can no longer rotate our output shaft. That means the servo is applied, right? We're locked onto that direct drum. To do this, I'm going to use our servo tool. Again, that's a J29714. If you don't have this tool, you can use a clamp, just a giant bar clamp going over the top of the casing. Again, like we saw in the previous video. Something like this works fine. Again, a long one, and just put it along the top. Squeezing the servo in this direction. This tool will just mount in there. As you can see, just screws in the side. Once we have our servo there, let's go ahead and tighten our screw. And that is going to push our servo in. And again, all I'm doing is turning the vice grip at the same time as I'm turning this. Just to make sure we're still able to move. Tighten this a little bit. See when we're applied. We're almost there, I can tell already. Oh yeah, just a smidge more. Yep, that's good. Now what we want to do is take our measurements, see if we can fit our 1/8 of an inch bar in between there. It's close. Just gonna take a hair off that apply pin, and I think we'll be good to go. Hey, how about taking a second, like and subscribe, huh? Come on, show some love. Let's just go ahead and disassemble our tool. Get our ring out of there. So we need to take a hair off the tip. Let's bring it over to the grinder and I'll show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and fire on the grinder. All I do is chuck it up into a 1/2 inch drill. I know, Craftsman thing, whatever, the other. And I just spin it in the drill while I'm grinding. Again, very easy way. Always keep your angle set too. And I'm just going to take a little bit off. Now that we ground our pin, let's give it another test. Mount her in there. Put our retaining ring back in. Yes, it's got more room this time. I'm going to do our clearance test. Again, we're looking for 125 as our ideal. We'll use a big welding clamp, the Harbor Freight welding clamp. Of course, I have my vice grips mounted on the output shaft. Again, make sure you put some duct tape or something so you don't damage the output shaft. I have the clamp set up here, just mounted it on my base. My clamp, you can mount it anywhere convenient, just the swing arm. And again, the swing arm is mounted onto the side of the servo. See if we can get you a good angle in there. Mounted onto the side of the servo. Right, so we're just measuring our travel distance. Ideally measure it from the center, but again, we're using the big clamp, so that'll be a challenge. So initially make sure that your servo is pulled all the way out. Again, make sure that it's not pushed in like so. Right, since we don't have a return spring in, you're going to need to force that return out. Make sure that your gauge is close to 0. I'll just move my dial a little. Here we go. And then take your clamp, and what we want to do is push down onto our servo. I'm just mounting it as flush as I can. And just push it down. And then what you want to do is turn that vice grip. See, it's still moving. So tighten up a little bit more till it just stops moving. And we're at 110. You can see I'm still moving it. Tighten it up a little more. She's at 120. Try to turn that vice grip. Oh, she's tight as heck. Maybe just a smidge more. And about there, 123. And she ain't budging. So in this case, we're right on. We're about 123, 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. Ideally, we want to be 125 with the CK servo. Again, just to show you what I'm doing here, my clamp is just mounted onto the side of the pan, so I'm not damaging anything. And of course, I'm turning my vice grips and watching the gauge as I move. When I can no longer turn the vice grips, I'm calling it good. And in this case, I'm right at about 124. Of course, I could have used the servo tool that we used in the last video. That would work just as well, and actually a lot better. But again, I wanted to show you what it would be like using just a simple Harbor Freight clamp and the adjustable setup for the dial indicator. This setup would have also worked just as well, if not better. Again, see the previous video for a bunch of different ways to set up our servo and check our clearance. And once you're satisfied your clearance is good, I'm just going to go ahead and use these alligator pliers, I guess you call them, I don't know. But they're super convenient for this type of thing, again being a right angle. Do you need them? No, of course not. Separate your servo ring. Go ahead and remove your servo along with your cushion spring. And the pin. Now we used the smallest ring that was included in the kit. They also have a thicker ring. So if our clearance was too loose, you could install the thicker ring into your case. And of course, with your cushion spring on it, that takes up some of the gap. If your clearance was too short, again, what you do is take your pin and grind some of the end off as we did previously. But in my case, the ring is fine, and of course we adjusted our pin, so we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and reassemble it. What we'll do is take our servo assembly, make sure your lip seal's on there as well. Go ahead and mount your O-ring on the outside for your case. Make sure whatever ring you used is installed. Cushion spring, followed by your pin. And this time, don't forget your return spring. And let's go ahead and install it into the transmission. Let's go ahead and install our assembly. Again, make sure everything's nice and lubed. Go ahead and install it. Helps the turn. Again, it's going to be a tight fit because we have springs fighting us back. Right, make sure your pin's in there with your return spring. Follow it up with your cushion. Now what we want to do is use our clamp. I'm just going to go ahead and use that welding clamp. Put it on the top. Push down. Again, you're fighting a lot of spring pressure. Push it in nice and tight. Get it past your O-ring surface, snap ring surface. And you'll hear it click once she's passed through there. Of course, go ahead, take your snap ring, Get it on there. Make sure she's in the groove. Then let up on your clamp. And of course, our servo is now installed. Do one last check. When you've got her installed, again, put your vice grip on the corner there and just make sure that you can turn it. Everything's free. Not too tight, not too loose, just like when we were setting it up. So again, everything's working fine.